Given that this is a math course, often we're going to have to put things on pencil and paper and then submit them in some way, shape, or form. That usually comes in the way of taking a picture of it with your cell phone or some other kind of document camera, and then putting them in a file and submitting it to the D2L website. So here's a couple of hints that I would highly recommend you pay attention to because it makes my life and your life so much easier. Not doing these things could result in you not getting marks. It has happened in the past. Luckily, not very often. Usually, I can kind of correct it or work around it. But to make sure that you are successful in submitting work, please follow the following rules. Number one, make sure your questions are clearly numbered. It's fantastic when you show all of your work. I do appreciate that. However, if I don't know what is what, I can't figure out which questions I'm looking at. I try to go over it like relatively quickly. And if I can't find what I'm looking for, I usually assume it's not there and move on. Often I miss things. Now, normally I would come back and remark that if you point that out to me, but just to make your life easier and my life easier, please try to number everything properly. Number two, make sure your pictures are clear enough to read. I get a lot of submissions that look like this, that there's absolutely no way that I could ever make out what it says because the picture was either taken with too low a resolution or from too far away, too much glare, too dark, etc. So please do make sure that you look at that before you include it. Number three, make a single file if possible. Now I realize that we're all using different technologies. Some people have different types of phones. Some people don't have phones at all. So there are all kinds of different ways that you could possibly make your picture files to submit them. And depending on your device, this may be easier or harder. If you can make it into a single file, please do. It makes my life a lot easier. When I'm dealing with multiple files, not only do they get all over the place, but I can only grade one file at a time, which means I have to try and figure out what's happening in one file, close it, switch over to a different file, and then sometimes bounce back and forth, especially if people take multiple pictures of the same question. So for instance, if a question is relatively long and they do part of it on one page and then part of it on a separate page, it becomes extremely time consuming to go back and forth between a bunch of photos. Orientation. Uh, I don't know about you, but I have a really hard time reading math upside down and sideways. It takes me a lot longer than reading it the right way up. If you could please make sure your pictures are oriented properly. And this is one of the reasons that I prefer the one file method. So basically putting your pictures into a document and submitting it that way. The reason for that is D2L seems to randomly display JPEG pictures or other picture files with whatever orientation it deems correct. So even if your picture file is properly oriented, please make sure it is anyway. But if it is, it may still get put up sideways or upside down, and that makes it much more difficult to mark. File types. The best file types that you can do are PDF, DocX, which is Microsoft Word, or just a straight up Google Doc. Those are all usually readable without any problems. I have had a couple of issues with PDFs that are created through weird programs. Sometimes they're a little bit corrupt, but usually even then I can download them and manually open them. It's not too much of a hassle. Good ones would be JPEGs or PNG files, so basically most picture files work. Same thing I mentioned earlier is that the orientation on those sometimes gets messed up, which is why it's not always ideal to have those. And submitting in HEIC, which is an Apple file type, I can't read those at all in any way, shape, or form. And zip files can't be read by D2L. So in order to read that, I have to download it to my desktop, unzip it, open up all the files separately, and then mark that way, which is a huge time-consuming thing. So please do not zip your files. I would rather have 5 pictures separate than one zipped file. Question 6. This is again partially for you, partially for me. If you can rename your files, a lot of people are just submitting their files based on whatever random name it comes up with when it's produced. The problem with that is that, again, if there are 4, 5, 6 images, um, I sometimes have to look through all 6 of them before I find the question I'm trying to grade. And then when I go to grade the next question, I have to go through all 5 or 6 of them again to find the next one. It's very time consuming. If you can name those properly, even if it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's okay. But I'm going to point out that you may want to access these files again later. and having them named so that you can save them on your Chromebook or phone or whatever it is you're doing your work on is helpful to you too in case you need to find those afterwards. The last real point is check your file before submitting it. This happens more often than you'd think, where I get a file and I open it and it is not the homework for that assignment or that assessment. So in this case, I just put up a bit of spelling homework there from obviously elementary school, but I've gotten science reports, I've gotten English reports, I've gotten history reports, I've gotten math reports, just the wrong ones. So please make sure that you are looking at your file and submitting the right one. And that comes back to naming your files reasonably so that you actually are knowing what you're submitting. Just before we go, I'm going to show you basically how you can deal with a couple of putting your pictures into a Google Doc. It's as easy as dropping and dragging, and many times it will basically make it beautiful for you. So I'm just going to take a few pictures here that I've prepared. Here's some nice homework pictures, and I'll drop them in one at a time. So I put that math homework one in, and that looks fantastic. Easy to read, properly oriented, good to go. Okay, I'm going to put another one in. This one is sideways, unfortunately. So it looks good. I can read it. Handwriting's half decent, but it's oriented improperly. Easy fix. Click on it. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can actually see the whole thing. Click on it, and then up here, just grab that little dot and rotate it. And then you'll notice it's now the right size. And then from there, you can make it a little bit bigger if you'd like. Recenter it. Yeah, guess you're limited on how big you can make it, but you know, make it a decent size if you can, so it's easier to read. I'll do a third picture here. This is the other problem. Now that one's pretty easy to read, but if you put in a picture that's a little too small, just grab it, make it a little larger, have it take up some room so that it's actually easier for me to read. That would be awesome. My old person eyes are deteriorating, and anything you can do to help them would be appreciated. And then my last one here, unsupported image type. What the heck? Okay. Anyway, I'll put it in a proper image type here. We'll try it again. Now it's a JPEG. And sometimes you'll have something like this. May not say the same thing that this one says, but sometimes you put in a picture where only there's a small piece of it that you actually care about. If you could do me a favor, just double click on it. You'll notice these little lines come up and you can crop it. And when you crop to just the part that you want me to see, it makes it easier. Please make sure you don't crop out any of the numbering, like if the number at the side in the column. But if you've got something that has a bunch of excess in it, cropping it is always nice. Okay, that's about it. That's how to produce a nice single file, if at all possible, and submit your homework so that it will be properly marked and evaluated without any problems. If you have questions, make sure you let me know.